there.
And welcome everyone to the PCS Like a Pro show. I'm your host, Megan Harless, as always, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. It is a topic that we hear many questions about every year as families are moving or are unpacking from their move and issues arise. Before we get into that, just want to remind everybody we are in order season. Everyone is coming down and getting issued their orders for their next PCS for where they're going to next. Just a reminder, as soon as you get those official orders, get into DPS and get your move set up so that way your shipment is in the queue for when they start booking those summer moves. Even if you are planning to do a PPM, a full or a partial, you still need to set it up as a PPM in DPS to let the military know how you are planning to move and to go through all that counseling and approval that you need for that as well. So don't forget, as soon as you get those official orders, get your shipment set up on DPS. So let's just dive into what we got going for you today, because as I said, this is a topic that we hear many questions about every year for families, and that is about mold and infestations of multiple different kinds. So joining us today, I've got Brandon and Melissa. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Can you both just take a quick minute and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am marketing for CC Restoration. We are a fire water mitigation company that specializes in content cleaning. And this is Brandon.
How's it going, Brandon? This is the family business, kind of grew up in the industry, so been around it for way too long. It kind of chose me. I didn't choose it, unfortunately. But yeah, so we're just here at CC Restoration. I kind of do it all from determining salvageability to writing the estimates, dealing with your insurance or your moving handler or whoever it might be on your side of things that's paying for any losses that you might experience, and just ensuring that your loss is taken care of in a timely, efficient manner.
No, awesome. And you mentioned this a little bit, Melissa, as we get into our first question here is, what is CC Restoration and what is the role and purpose of a restoration company?
So the role that we play, we really enjoy working with the people that we work with, but we prefer to never have to work with them again. When disaster strikes their home with the personal property, frozen pipes that flood the entire house, or heaven forbid, fire that takes out the neighbor's house or the backfield, your home, there are certain things that can be done to help stabilize the property, and there are items in the home that can be salvaged. So that is where we come in. We go in, stabilize the property, remove anything that can be salvageable, again, whether it's water damage or fire damage, and then we make sure everything's cleaned up. But we also specialize in contents, like I said, and we help families who are moving in and out of the state, primarily military, with their contents.
We're able to go in and categorize the class of loss and the category of loss that we're dealing with, level of contamination, whether or not things can be decontaminated or restored back to pre-loss condition. And that's really the term you're going to hear us say a lot, pre-loss condition. We're a certified company for water, mold, fire, odor, all of the above. And we follow the standards for the IRCRC, which kind of dictate, okay, if you have this item and you're going to return it to the person that it belongs to, one, is it going to be safe for them to be around? Two, is it going to be in the same condition that it was prior to the loss happening? And three, ultimately, are they going to be able to notice that something took place with this item?
No, that's very helpful. So with all that, can you walk us through the process on what happens from start to finish when you're notified that a family has mold in their shipment and items need to go through a restoration process?
I mean, ultimately, the first step is just a quick response. When you're dealing with microbial growth, it's something that can multiply extremely quickly. So you can go from having a few items that can be cleaned or decontaminated, or can't be, but are separated out of those non-contaminated goods, to everything in the shipment is contaminated and must be disposed of. When you're dealing with microbials, the main concern for us is health. We take, personal and individual health, but also child's health very, very safely. The interesting thing about the industry is there's no standard for determining total loss items. Every company kind of does it themselves. So we really pride ourselves in taking that second glance and fighting on your guys' behalf to say this item isn't safe to be returned. So like going back a little bit before I go on to any tangents. So the very first step is just a quick response. We want to make sure that either the company that has possession of your personal property can deliver it to our facility where we can start sorting it, or we're going to take the quick response to go and pick up your items and start sorting it as quickly as possible, unwrapping or unboxing any furniture, any items that you might have mold contamination on, unboxing boxes and making sure that your clothes and smaller items, paperwork, personal documentation isn't lost in this process, that your personal effects, your birth certificate, social security card, credit cards, all of that good stuff, can be restored, or at a minimum can be returned to you for you to have it until you replace it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a good thing in there about our health concerns and health conditions. And so just a reminder for everyone that if you or someone in your family has a health condition where mold can be a severe issue for that, you should have it documented. That helps you in the case that your shipment does have mold. If the company tries to say, well, this can be, restored or returned or whatever it is, that documentation helps you be able to get it replaced rather than repaired for those health conditions. So just make sure you have that all documented if you fall into that category. So with all that, how do you determine if something is salvageable versus non-salvageable?
The biggest determining factor is pre-loss condition. I had a shipment come through. It was in a warehouse, military move getting stored, and they had a water loss just due to the freezing temperatures that we experienced here in Colorado Springs. And I was unboxing a TV, and when I picked it up, just water was pouring out of it like Niagara Falls, right? That's definitely something where you can tell that those internal components, when it is dried, are going to corrode and rust. And, it's one of those things of, it might work now, but is it going to, stop working in 6 months when the TV's life expectancy is 3 to 5 years? Or is this wood item not properly sealed or have a different kind of sealing on the bottom where moisture was sucked up and wicked up the legs, as a result, expanding it, cracking it, causing seams to appear and just an uneven finish? Or even, when you're dealing with ceramics and ceramics are sitting in water, whether they take up too much of that moisture and lose their structural integrity, or, microbial growth on mattresses or clothing or food. All food that we come across is total loss when we're experiencing with contaminated losses, because we really value not putting anything in or on the body that can cause you any kind of health, harm or adverse effects, and then really determining whether the item that we're returning to you is in proper condition, because you're not responsible for the loss that is occurring. So it's really important that you're not returned, or items are not returned to you that are affected beyond your control without something being your fault.
Now, I love hearing you say the things that are in or on the body, because that's always a big concern we get, is can this or can this not be salvageable, and what should we push back on to have replaced versus have it repaired? So are there certain items that should not go through a remediation process, like hard materials versus soft materials? Can you walk us through some of that?
Kind of. There isn't, like I said, a standard. It's all a case-by-case basis. For CC restoration, like I said, everybody does it differently. But when it comes to us, items that 1,000% of the time, if we're dealing with the contaminated loss, we'll go ahead and non-sal is mattresses. That's the very first thing. If we see a mattress that has, whether it's fire, smoke, asbestos, lead outbreak, whatever it might be, if there's a mattress in a contaminated shipment or home, it is total loss. We're not putting you back on that mattress to sleep. Other items that we non-sal a lot of the times are like Christmas trees or fake plants. Reasoning for that is the time that it would take for us to clean every square inch of surface area on that item versus just replacing it. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then other items that, we kind of, back and forth, it's just a case by case basis, are like washing machines and stoves. Sometimes we'll non-sal it based upon the level of contamination or water exposure. And sometimes we can decontaminate it and return it to you unaffected.
That's good to know. The mattresses are always a big one that we hear about, that we always try to tell everybody. That's something that you should push to have replaced. It should not be a remediated item. So what are some items that could be salvaged that most folks probably don't think it's a possibility to have done?
That's just one of those things where it's a case by case. A lot of people wouldn't expect that their hard furniture or even their clothing could be salvaged. But there's a lot of really good antimicrobials or cleaning techniques in the industry that go above and beyond your standard household, cleaners. We're able to go on a deeper level and restore goods that might have a deeper level of affected, or might be deeply affected compared to other items that you'd be shocked are able to be returned to you. And if it's something that CC Restoration themselves can't handle, which is not very much, but if it is something that we personally can't handle, we have a lot of really good partnerships and friends and affiliates in the industry that we work closely with to ensure that at the end of the day, we are able to restore as much as possible, even items that you didn't think was possible.
I'm going to throw a little curveball at you for this next question here. Is there ever a time where something can be remediated and then it goes through the remediation process and it doesn't come back out to that pre-damaged condition?
Every single job. Every single
what are some of those items that kind of run into those issues?
Sometimes what you see, carpets are one of those that's very hard. Curtains as well because they shrink. But another factor when determining non-salvageable contents is, can we adequately clean this? So if it can be brought back to pre-loss condition, is the measures that have to take place to achieve that goal going to damage the piece? And sometimes we get instructed, try and do it and see what you can accomplish. But, with the chemicals that sometimes we have to use to achieve some of these goals, especially fire claims, we find that it strips paint materials or lacquers or finishes, or eats away and corrodes at metals and plastics and different things like that, where the attempt to restore a piece resulted in physical damage, and we can't return that piece to them. And in the attempt to bring it back to them, just damage occurs, secondary damage.
No, that makes sense. And some of that remediation process, you mentioned the use of chemicals in there. Is it all using different types of chemicals for the restoration, or is there like other pieces to that process?
There are so many different chemicals that could be purchased and used, and so many different chemicals that can't be mixed and can be mixed. And I mean, it's if you want to go down the rabbit trail of what can and can't be used in the restoration industry, we certainly can. But every type of loss does have its own, it's like, what's Newton's law? Every action has an equal or opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. Just depending on what you're dealing with the loss can result in what you're using, whether it's an antimicrobial for, mold spores, or just a deodorizer and a disinfectant for category 3 sewage losses, or a stronger deodorizer and a thermal fog with ozone treatment for fires, or whatever it might be. Everything has its own reaction and its own path to being restored.
One of the things that we hear commonly from some companies, some moving industry companies, and then some housing property companies, is that when mold is discovered, is to just wipe it down with some bleach. Is that really an effective method of cleaning and getting rid of mold?
So that's step one. Bleach is an oxidizer, which does a really good job at breaking down the microbial spores and suffocating those spores. But it's really hard to effectively clean mold spores. I mean, the first thing that you're going to look at if you have it in your structure is, can we clean this, decontaminate it, neutralize it, and then seal it, or do we have to completely remove it? And what you typically see is the step one is using an oxidizer like bleach, or there's other chemicals out there that you can use to really break down and flush out those mold spores and start the process of getting it cleaned. The secondary step is using what's called an antimicrobial, and there's hundreds and hundreds of brands out there. We have our preferences, other people, our competition have theirs, but it's just, you use an antimicrobial to decrease the likelihood of future mold growth. And then you use like a primer, whatever it might be, to encapsulate it and prevent it, even with the cleaning, even with the antimicrobial, you really trap it in there and you get it stuck by sealing it in there. And you have to use a non-porous sealing primer for it to be effective, but you seal it in there and prevent it from happening. What you see on contents a lot of times is, if you are going to go through the process of restoring something with mold contamination, it's the same beginning process with, a decontamination, whether that's an oxidizer or, disinfectant, and then an antimicrobial. And then depending on the level of penetration, you could go through the process of sanding and resealing to, really try and achieve the same look and finish that it had. But ultimately, sometimes you just have to call it a total loss for those personal property items.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into our next question then, is that we know sometimes mold and other infestations can start in our home and really not be noticed until it's time to move, when we start moving furniture away from walls and things like that. So what are some things that families can do to help prevent the issues from starting in their home before they have to move?
So one of the things that most people might not realize is, we breathe in mold every single day. Mold is around us. If I had my guy come in here and test the air quality, we'd be surrounded by mold particles. It's just not enough to hurt us. Factors that we do see a lot is when you're moving out of a home, and we do a lot of moving. We're not exactly a moving company. I guess you could call us a glorified moving company. But you experience not us of course, but putting holes in walls and other things like that. What you really find is the number one rule of thumb when it comes to mold is if it's encapsulated and not exposed, it is not a harmed human. So there might be mold in the drywall around me right now, but as long as I don't put air to it and allow it to come out of where it's trapped at, there's no harm or risk. And that's something that we have to look at as restorers when drawing a structure, whether there might be previous mold or even mold that grew behind the wall, but can we dry it as a lack of decontamination to prevent us from throwing those spores into the air? Or even on the personal property side, stepping away from the structure is if I'm moving this contents out, am I wrapping it in moving pads or am I just setting it on the truck? And if so, are the moving pads getting wet, which is going to encourage that moisture to stay around? Or is it raining outside and I might just be putting it in there and not drying off the piece to really ensure that at the end of the day, there is no microbial growth in my shipment?
Yeah, that moving in the rain is one that we hear a lot within our community. It's hard sometimes based on the schedule to have to if it's raining on your delivery day to be able to reschedule that delivery day or reschedule that pickup date. We hear a lot of concerns about, like it's pouring outside and they're trying to load. And occasionally you get that picture where it's like their couch is sitting on their driveway in a downpour.
Yeah.
And it's like, you should just move that to the curb and leave it now.
We experience it too, right? We're packing out homes in a blizzard right now. So there's moisture everywhere, right?
Just trying to keep things as dry as possible.
Yes, no, absolutely. So we talked about a lot of things with the process today and a lot of good information. Is there anything else that families should know or need to know that we have not already discussed?
I'd say just keep track of where your shipment is. A lot of times what we experience from these losses is, shipments sitting outside for months at a time unnecessarily and growing mold or just not properly stored in a ventilated or, climate controlled area, which can encourage pipe breaks or negative side effects from that. So I just say, really keeping track of where your stuff is and when you're getting your stuff. And I know that it's all scheduled and regulated when it comes to military moves, but the more knowledgeable you keep yourself on what's going on with your personal property, the less likely you are to experience this type of loss.
No, absolutely. And that's where our military families, you guys can all reach out to your move coordinators at your transportation service provider to be able to get an update as to where your shipment is, where it's located at, where it's being stored at, and they can give you information on that. Now, if it's going into storage of some sort, keep in mind it's not guaranteed to be climate controlled right now. It is temperature controlled. There's a range that they're supposed to keep the warehouses and things in, but it's not necessarily climate controlled. But your transportation service provider, your move coordinator, should be able to give you more information about your shipment, where it's at, and the conditions that it is in. Brandon and Melissa, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us and being able to educate us more on what this process is for our families.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
No, absolutely. And everybody else watching, thank you for taking your time to join us today as well. Tune in next week, same time, same place for another great show. And just a reminder, if you're in the middle of a PCS or you're planning for a PCS, you got questions, you got concerns, you don't know the answers or where to find them, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help you as best as we can. And just remember, until then, take care of each other.